first of all, I want to thank two organizers of the conference for inviting me to participate in the conference. And it's a big pleasure for me to be present today. And I enjoyed the presentations of the previous speakers. And I am not quite like an expert in this field. I will speak from the point of view of an academic. But while preparing the presentation, I've come across or I looked through a lot of, probably quite a lot of European documents, articles, and what I'm going to tell you about will be much in line with what has already been mentioned. But nevertheless, I think that the ideas, on the one hand, it's probably the ideas will repeat, but on the other hand, they will repeat because these ideas are really very important for sustainable development of higher education in Ukraine. And what I want to say is that here we can see the global goals, and 5 years ago, the definition of the objectives and goals of sustainable development. Education, and 5 years after the definition, educational institutions are still continuing to detail the steps to be taken for their implementation in university communities. And these 17 objectives were adopted in 2015, and still we have the plan for the following 15 years, what to do and in which direction to develop to make the world a much better place to live, to create, and so on. And these areas cover the problems of gender inequality and aimed at reduction inequalities, actions which address climate change, quality of education, and so on. And it has been mentioned a lot about the role of education in general and the role of higher educational institutions in particular in the implementation of these goals. Because all the goals base their arguments on knowledge and ask for the knowledge and suggest future change with reference to belief in science. So in this particular case, universities can play the key role and be just the key player in the attainment of these goals. And the role of education is highlighted in the fourth goal, like quality education, which calls for inclusive, equitable, and quality education. And but at the same time, education can contribute greatly to the attainment of each of the mentioned goals. And if you speak about education, so the changes should deal with all the spheres. I mean, just teaching, learning, research, like social activity, and so on. So universities can support the implementation of each goal. Actually, this is the goal I told you about, just particular focused on education, on quality education. And what I'm going to talk about, it's like higher education can be for sustainable development and higher education as sustainable development itself. And probably the picture is not very good because these two goals, or probably these two aspects are separated in this slide. But probably they should be connected because they are really interconnected. Because higher education it develops itself well, it will develop it will serve for sustainable development and as sustainable development as well. Okay. And we've heard a lot about the European experience, the experience of European universities, associations, and so on. So it's great experience, and we really need to learn a lot. And it was really very, it is a very pleasurable experience to listen to the experts in this field. And I want to say that Ukraine also has at least I have come across the project of the strategy of sustainable development of Ukraine until 2030. It was published in 2017, and here so I have chosen goal 4 and the tasks for the implementation of goal 4 in Ukraine. And so these goals, these tasks are much or they take into account the content of Ukraine, what we need here in Ukraine. And we see that much attention in these goals is paid to eliminating gender inequality in the field of education. Also, these tasks address their problem of equitable education. Yes, and education, secondary education, higher education, vocational training as well. Quality development systems, preschool education as well, regardless of health, place of the residence and wealth. And high quality vocational and higher education as well. And ensuring that young people and adults develop socially necessary skills. Well, there are some other tasks within Goal 4 for Ukraine. Ensure equal opportunities, the same equal opportunities, while on different levels, and acquisition of all students' knowledge and skills on the principles of development, in particular on health issues, lifestyle, human rights, national and patriotic upbringing, awareness of values of cultural diversity, and so on. So we think that's really very important for Ukraine now. So these are the tasks which need to be fulfilled by 2030. Well, and what can universities do to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals in general and Goal 4 in particular? It has already been mentioned. These things have already been mentioned today. Research, education, leadership, and also governance as well. I want to focus on each of them, taking into account the peculiarities of Ukrainian society. So, and as for learning, of course, universities have really great potential to teach the whole generation, and yes, it's a great opportunity, and at the same time, it's a huge responsibility. And so, what is necessary is to pay particular attention to the roles of universities in realizing processes of lifelong learning for sustainable development by improving formal and informal learning in this direction. Of course, we need to ensure empowering and mobilizing young people, and it has already been mentioned by the previous speakers. And of course, develop necessary skills. And here I need to mention the skills, key competencies for higher education for sustainable development. And we can see just skills. According to UNESCO, there is general agreement that sustainability citizens need to have certain key competencies and allow them to engage constructively and responsibly with today's world. While these are cross-cutting competencies and that are necessary for all learners worldwide, and of course over different ages and developed at different age-appropriate levels. But I want to point out that these skills should be acquired by citizens or by people of all ages, but at the age-appropriate levels. Well, probably I will comment on some of the competencies. So maybe anticipatory competency, which means the ability to understand and evaluate multiple futures, possible, probable, and desirable, and to create one's own vision for the future. And vision for the future just for individual future and for future of the community probably. So it depends on the social roles people undertake. Normative competency, also very a part of the key competencies, while it's the ability to understand and reflect on the norms and values that underlies one's actions. Negotiate sustainability values, principle, goals, and targets. While also very transdisciplinary collaboration competency, really very important. It seems to me it's very important nowadays. It's the ability to learn from others and to transcend the traditional boundaries of your own discipline. Well, we really need it just to, sorry, some conversation. Well, of one discipline and profession. Well, self-awareness competency, which deals a lot with self-reflection, with reflection, what is good, what is bad, what the best practices are, how some problems can be, how can some problems be solved in some different ways. So actually, these are the competences we need to develop in our students. Besides, like some professional competences, but they, of course, they are interconnected, because system thinking competency is important just for everybody, actually, in any profession, as strategic, in almost any profession, as well as strategic competency and so on. Well, and I spoke about, paid much attention to, like I focused on transdisciplinary collaboration competency, and it's, in my opinion, it's important because it also develops like openness, tolerance, and so it's also very important to attain the goals we need. Well, and so we still are speaking about education. Education, yes. This like first part, like first way, first direction, and so, and actually the sustainability key competences I have just spoken about, they represent what sustainability citizens particularly need to deal with today's complex challenges. And of course, all these competences, they enable citizens to deal with new challenges that I'm sure we will face. So, for example, this year we faced coronavirus, and it's a great challenge for any country and for any levels, for any professionals. So it's really a great challenge. So as for universities, well, the world is changing very fast, and we get like loads of information. And 5 years ago, I read in some American article that people will need to change their, in future, in 2050, people will need to change their profession every 7 years. So I don't know, of course, it's quite challenging, but still we must realize that we should be ready for curriculum reform. And we should be ready to take into account the new conditions, everything that appears, all the new challenges, and so on. And also course review. Also, it's also the necessity, because sustainability. So just we may call them sustainability-related courses. Should be implemented, or each course should take into account the opportunities to develop the key competencies I have just told you about. Well, and so that's it. And I want to move on to probably the next important direction. It's research. Much has been told today about research in universities, and so this document you can see in the screen, Science for Achieving Sustainable Development, the Future is Now, points out that actually science and technology are powerful agents of change, for better or worse, depending on how they are steered. Okay, and also, sorry. And also, one of the key messages is that educational institutions at every level, especially universities, should incorporate high-quality theoretical and practically oriented courses, and so on and so forth. So, universities need to support the full spectrum of research work, which is needed to address the CDGs. Well, including interdisciplinary research. And of course, we need cooperation with foreign partners, of course, and just to foster some innovative solutions. And so this is like the next thing I want to tell you about. So this is the problem we face. It's like open access to published scientific knowledge. The number of scientific journals, articles, and the overall amount of knowledge generated have soared. And too often, however, access to these growing values, to them remains restricted, and very often in the hands of commercial publishers, of course. So it's like, it's not a kind of reprimand. It's like, but it's on the one hand, we can understand them, but on the other hand, for just to develop research and innovation capacities, we need to have this access, and we need to have the access to fast tracking innovations. And that is what we need here in Ukraine. And so I know I read that much is done in Europe in this way, and the European Union and various national funding agencies now require open access for scientific publications they fund. Well, which is of course good. I can say the situation has improved a little bit now, but still we don't have such a wide access to these respected journals. And by the way, the same message is in the report I have just shown you about the uneven global distribution of scientific capacity and knowledge access. And so it's mentioned that United Nations member states must support the effort to make all relevant scientific knowledge immediately accessible, especially to low and middle income countries. Wow, good news. Wow, and if we speak about the research in Ukraine, we can see I have found this information in the report of National Agency for Higher Education Quality Assessment. So the report was published in 2019, and so such are the figures, and we can see that, we can talk about gradual increase in the number of postgraduate students since 1991, and with the top point in 2010, and subsequent decline. It seems to me that that it will decline in futures. At least we experience it and communicating with many colleagues from different universities of Ukraine. So I think that these like figures, the number of PhD students will decrease in future. Okay, so it's about a research, yes, and also maybe like research. So students, university students, are not very much motivated to research, I'd say. So this is my observation, and not only mine, but many of my colleagues. And so this is one more direction for us to make research more attractive to young people, and also some research career as well. The next point is leadership. So leadership, so in the screen you can see external leadership, but actually we may speak about internal and external leadership as well. So universities must envision that being scientific institutions, they have to act as partners in regional networks. It goes without saying, and universities try to do it, but still it has already been mentioned that we need some cooperation with stakeholders in local communities, and it will help to respond to the needs of society, to better respond to the needs of society, and to meet their requirements now. Well, and now we are just we are learning how to work with stakeholders. It's something new for us, but well, so I can say that just from my own experience, I can say that it works if the stakeholders are actively involved and are really interested. So it works. The role of the university is also to protect the academic freedom and to secure good working conditions for university professionals. It's also very important. The leadership of a university must show that they open for creativity and flexibility in ways of teaching, types of knowledge evaluation, curriculum changes, academic mobility between disciplines, greater student mobility between disciplines and faculties, and between the university and society. I mean lifelong learning. Acceptance of new types of disciplines, and where both teachers and students can explore their combination of knowledge. And universities should use their social power to present to the world what academics see had the most relevant knowledge to the problems we are facing. Wow. The next thing is governance. So, so I have already mentioned that we need to change university disciplinary structure. So we are experiencing it now by introducing more optional subjects and so on. And it takes time, dedication, and sometimes very often financial resources. This means that universities must give professors time to create new curriculum, interact across disciplines, and reflect on how to present learning outcomes. And also, it's very important to have some links with business, industry, or just with some other stakeholders to monitor employer trends and skills requirements. And it's quite difficult to speak about the quality of training of graduates of higher education institutions, as Ukraine hasn't yet conducted and is not conducting systematic monitoring of employment. Systematic monitoring of employment. And I've got some data, some information, some separate statistics were released by Hanna Novosad, the former Minister of Education and Science of Ukraine. It was on the 26th of December 2019. And she stated that in 2019, almost 50% of the officially registered unemployed were people with higher education. For comparison, the share of unemployed people with professional education was only 30%. Actually, I have found it in the report of National Agency for Higher Education Quality Assessment. And the figures, of course, are very disappointing. And so they really indicate the urgent need to create a system for tracking the trajectory of movement, a career path of graduates of universities. And also, it also indicates, these figures also indicate the necessity for closer cooperation with stakeholders. Really, just to know what modern market needs, what skills they need to university graduates need to acquire. Well, and things like that. And also it's a good idea. It would be a good idea to create a platform for sharing of best practice in the university's work with these sustainable development goals and with a particular focus on education. So it would be also good. The next thing is internationalization. And also I have found such figures, share of international. So of course, internationalization means not only the share of international students or like Ukrainian students studying abroad, but still some interesting figures. Yes, some interesting data. And we can see that medical studies are at the top and are the most attractive for international students. Well, I have got such information. And so I think it will be interesting to have a look at the number of Ukrainian students abroad. So this 2017-2018 academic year, so their information provided by the same national agency, and we see that the largest amount of young people study in Poland, in European countries, and so on. Well, and probably one of the problems of actually I am an English teacher, and I think that one of the problems of in general low student mobility or not very high student mobility is the lack of knowledge of foreign languages. And I have found also some data. It's external independent evaluation, ZNO in Ukrainian, the results 2020. So this external independent evaluation is necessary for school leavers to enter higher educational institutions. Well, and so you can see the results, and so the percentage of those who passed their test who got more than 161 scores, well, is not very high. So I have come across such figures. And don't forget that while people come to universities, so these are the school leavers who took and who passed the external independent evaluation. But there are many of them who didn't take foreign languages. And so they come to university with a very low level of language proficiency. On the other hand, those who want to enter to get the master's degree, to study master's programs, need to pass external independent evaluation again after they get bachelor's degree, and probably the situation will gradually improve. But still, the level of language proficiency, foreign language proficiency among young people is not very high in Ukraine. It's also one of the problems. So what else? More than 1 billion people in the world today, and it's an estimated 50% of the world population. I was a little bit shocked by this figure, experience some form of disability. And people with disabilities face various forms of inclusion and have generally poorer health, lower education achievements, fewer economic opportunities, and high rates of poverty than people without disabilities. This is largely due to the lack of services available to them and many other obstacles they may be, including negative attitudes, beliefs, and prejudices. Actually, as for Ukraine, I don't think that just here there is some negative attitude, but the main problem is lack of services. Yes, available, so this is one of the problems. And so you can see now, well, there is the reform of secondary education, primary and secondary education in Ukraine. And one of the focus is the inclusive education. And so much attention is paid to it, but still here in the screen you can see the share of secondary schools with inclusive education. As for university, the situation is not very, very good, the same. And the problem is not only equipment, but also we need some special training and some just more professionals in this field. Okay. Funding, also one of the most crucial issues is funding. And here in the screen I have found such data about funding in different countries, like investments in higher education. Well, I'm not going to comment these figures, so there may be different reasons and so on. Like, I'm not criticizing, I'm just presenting the facts. But it's also a problem that I hope will be solved gradually. So actually, these are the budget expenses for higher education in the mentioned countries. Okay, so the next, teachers' education. I'm working at a pedagogical university, and I'm pretty sure that teachers play a particularly important role in educating new generations. And especially when we need to educate new generation with the growing awareness of the global challenges. And so I think that much attention should be paid to teachers' education, and it will also incorporate all the changes I have mentioned about, like curriculum reform, course update, while implementing new courses, internationalization, and so on. And just things like that. I see I'm a little bit limited, I have time limit. Well, and of course, if we want, we need to prepare teachers with the, who have well-developed key competencies, I have mentioned about, and only such teachers will be able to develop such competencies in their students. Well, and by the way, if we speak about teacher education, one of the tasks of one of the goals in Ukraine, within one of the tasks in Ukraine within Goal 4 is eliminate gender inequality among school teachers. And here we see some data about gender inequality among school teachers. Yes, there is still very low, very small share of men among teachers. Well, that is all about my presentation. And thank you for your attention. And I really think that we need to find our own way in attaining sustainability. Thank you very much.